Hey guys, welcome to my first ever movie review for my YouTube channel. This movie is Mortal Kombat, the latest video game adaptation that is currently playing in theaters as well as for a limited time on HBO Max. Um, so, before I get into the movie proper, I do want to first talk a little bit about the background of this video game that was so notorious back in the day. It ate a lot of quarters because maybe less because of the actual gameplay and more because of the content in it. So let's go all the way back to the year of 1992. And here we have the creators of Mortal Kombat. And they were first tasked with creating a game based on the Jean Claude Van Damme movie Universal Soldier for the company Midway. However, they were working on sort of a ninja type game. Once the Universal Soldier game didn't go through, they continued on with this ninja fighting type game that's sort of modeled after Hollywood style graphics. And it turned into Mortal Kombat, basically. And this was a huge hit when it came out because it sort of looked unlike any other game that had come out at that point. Most fighting games that were around, where it's just one-on-one combat, usually two people would stand at one arcade cabinet and try to fight each other. Most of them look like this, like Street Fighter, the Street Fighter series, where they kind of had this cartoonish look to them. They sort of looked like animated characters in a way, really souped up, beefy characters that have physiques that don't look like human beings, honestly. However, once Mortal Kombat came around, the characters actually started to resemble actual people. They used some sort of technology to capture the full body of model actors for the games. So it really was one of the games to really push forward the medium of video games, bridging that gap between a game and a movie. So, of course, because this is a fighting game and it's ultra realistic, it's going to go for a lot of controversy. So, when it came out, the violence in this game was super duper controversial. Although there were fighting games before that didn't really go under the same scrutiny, with this one, there's tons of blood, and a lot of the characters had special moves called fatalities that resulted in, like the picture there, a guy ripping another guy's head off, and the spinal cord comes with it. This was sort of an unheard of level of violence in games up to this point, at least in the mainstream. I mean, if you think about it, you're taking your kid to like a Chuck E. Cheese and they are being exposed to this kind of violence. You could see how it would cause a huge stink back in the day. So, what resulted of all these things is it actually went to Congress because of games like Mortal Kombat and the game Night Trap, which was used full motion video, and it was almost like watching a horror movie in a video game. It caused a lot of controversy, and parents were concerned that their kids were being exposed to such dangerous, violent ideas. And it really is kind of the game that led the way towards the ESRB rating system that we still use today, where every game, if you go into a store, has these ratings on it from E for everyone all the way to like mature and adults only. And of course, Mortal Kombat, it has that big M on it. So, kids who want to be cool, they play the game that is meant for the older kids. Um, so that's like the history of this game. It's pretty much steeped in violence and sort of being like on the cutting edge of movies and games. So, of course, it was inevitable that this huge thing would turn into a movie. And it did in at the height of its popularity in the mid 90s. We did get a Mortal Kombat movie. However, it did not really have the violence from the game. It was a PG-13 movie, and it was a tournament style film, very much in the spirit of an Enter the Dragon type movie. And it actually felt like the video game, unlike video game movies prior to Mortal Kombat, like the Super Mario Brothers movie and the Street Fighter movie, which are pretty much embarrassments in every way. They're good for a laugh, but they are not. They don't hardly resemble the games whatsoever. Yoshi looks like an actual T Rex and not like a cartoon. And in Street Fighter, it has some really bad acting from Jean Claude Van Damme, no less, who sort of, in a weird way, in a roundabout way, was what paved the way for the game to be created in the first place. But this movie, unlike those other crappy video game movies, this one looked like the game. The characters looked like the characters from the game. There were some really cool special effects for its time, although there's some really dated CGI. The actual like practical effects on like this character Goro here looked really cool, and the characters were like quirky and fun, and it was just like this fun mindless popcorn movie. And not to mention the soundtrack at the time became a phenomenon. You couldn't go anywhere in the 90s without hearing that iconic electronic beat from the movie trailer. It was everywhere. It was a phenomenon. It was a big deal, but the one thing it was missing all along, it looked like the movie. It was fun and mindless and might not have won any Oscars that year, but fans were happy with it for the most part. But it was missing the extreme violence from the games. That is probably the biggest thing that it was missing. It was bloodless. And so that's sort of what brings us to this movie from 2021. This new version of Mortal Kombat promises to bring violence back to the Mortal Kombat series. So here is my official review. What I thought about the movie. Does it capture the spirit of the games better than the other movies? And what are my overall thoughts on Mortal Kombat 21? All right, so I'm going to start with the good and then move to the bad and then tell you my overall thoughts. So, the good with Mortal Kombat is indeed the violence. Although some people might not think it goes far enough, other action movies like The Raid or The Raid 2 Redemption, or even recently the Bob Odenkirk movie Nobody, those movies do have an even more brutal sense of violence. But in terms of this sort of fun fantasy action movie world that it presents, I was fully satisfied by the amount of, over the top stylized action. Like in this shot right here, we have the character Sub-Zero, who's sort of like the Mr. Freeze of the Mortal Kombat series, where he like basically draws blood from a guy from punching him, and then in midair freezes that guy's blood. It turns into a knife, and then he stabs him with his own blood in an icicle form. And these are the kinds of visually inventive, you know, extreme acts of violence, basically, that fans like. It's things that cannot exist in real life. It's over the top. It's very thrilling to watch, and the action is really well done. There's a scene right at the beginning with this actor, and I forget his name. I'm pretty sure he was in some other samurai type movies, but he has an amazing opening scene where he's like taking on a bunch of guys. And yeah, it really delivers on the action. It's a movie based on a fighting game. And from my opinion, it delivers on the fighting itself. So really, that's all you can kind of ask for. Also, there's some pleasant surprises in the cast. The character of Kano from the series, fans will probably recognize. He's played by this Australian guy who is so funny in the movie. He has all these one-liners, and even though he's like pretty much a giant jerk to everyone around him, he's sort of the audience surrogate for most of the movie, because he's rolling his eyes at all of the like magical things that happen, and he's making sort of wise ass comments throughout the whole movie. And he is definitely the guy to watch. He is the he's the scene stealer of the movie. And I did see this in a movie theater, and most of his lines got laughs out of the audience. So definitely, he was the standout player. And then also the visual effects in general were really, really good. So not only the fighting, but all of the sort of CGI and how it mixed with the live action. So many of these video game movies just look so bad, and you can tell that not a lot of respect and effort was were are put into these a lot of the time, because it's not as respected of a genre as like some of these comic book movies. But here it was like I was kind of blown away by some of these, especially with Sub Zero, who again is like the guy who controls ice. And like there's that shot from the trailer where he freezes a gun's bullet before it comes out of the gun, and just the way the light is reflecting off of the ice, and just some of the creature effects. It is I thought it was like super impressive, especially after seeing the very primitive special effects in the '90s version. If you watch the sequel movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, that has some of the worst CGI ever committed to film, and this has really impressive visual effects. So it's like a night and day difference. Fans of this series will find a lot to enjoy from like a visual, pure spectacle standpoint. Um, However, that's all the good stuff. The fights, the CGI, some of the characters are interesting. But now it's time for the bad stuff. So, unfortunately, this movie suffers from a generic, complicated story. They just it starts off actually really good, and it has this sort of it starts off really simple, and we get this sort of hero's journey arc, but then all of a sudden they just keep throwing in characters as the movie goes on. They want to give the fans all of the characters from the movies, and that just ends up resulting in no one in particular having a really good story. It's sort of the Avengers syndrome, where you have so many characters you're trying to balance that you end up doing a disservice to all of them. The bad guys plan to kill all the good guys really is not explained whatsoever. It's just sort of this general idea of they want to stop them from competing in the Mortal Kombat tournament because they want control of the world, I guess. It doesn't really matter. It seems like any plot that is there is an excuse to hang these matchups and fights together. So if you're looking for a halfway decent story, you're probably not going to find that here. And speaking of the tournament, one of the main conceits of the game is its Enter the Dragon style tournament story. And this movie does not have that, even though it seems absolutely primed for that kind of story, because its main character is an MMA fighter who has a history with, in tournaments, and he's sort of at the end of his. He's not as good as he used to be, and he's getting beaten up all the time. And you get the sense that he's probably going to have an arc where he is going to be crowned the new champion of Mortal Kombat. While he does sort of prove himself throughout the movie, since there's no tournament, and the whole movie is just sort of hinting at this thing. This whole movie just sort of has that problem with a lot of these franchise movies where it's promising you something that will happen in the future. Like, they're going to do this Mortal Kombat thing, but it never happens in this actual movie. They just keep talking about it, and then the movie ends with no tournament, and you're just sort of left like, okay, I guess I'll have to wait for the sequel for this thing, which is kind of, I don't know. It sort of will leave you unsatisfied because it really feels like a prequel movie. Really, this movie is just for the fans. There's all kinds of Easter eggs and moments where, characters are revealed that if you have no experience with the video games, you'll have no idea what these things are. As someone who grew up with them, it was, amusing and fun along the way to see these characters brought to life in this sort of new way that's not a goofy 90s movie, but sort of the modern era version of these characters. If you have no relationship to these characters, you're not going to care. And so, yeah, it really is for the fans only. So, just to sum up, here's the good, here's the bad. The good is the violence, and some of the characters and the visual effects were impressive. But the bad is pretty much the majority of the story goes nowhere. It's all a big setup for a future film where conceivably you'll actually see the Mortal Kombat tournament instead of just talking about it. And also, really, it's only for the fans of the game. If you're not a fan or have no idea what Mortal Kombat even is, you're probably going to not find much to like. So ultimately, I am giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really good. I had a lot of fun with it, but I can see how people might not have a fun time with it. So take that what you will. Hope you enjoyed this review. Maybe there's more to come. Probably pretty soon, I will reveal what happened with the Oscars. If you want to follow my Letterboxd profile, the information is on the clapboard. And I guess I'll see you guys later.